now let's begin our session for the day. And before I begin, let's try to understand that why there's a need of development, like why there's a need of Apex and LWC. Because see, if we talk about Salesforce, as all of us know that Salesforce is a CRM solution. We can perform CRM activities by using Salesforce within CRM. We have inbuilt applications like sales application is there, service application is there. These all are standard applications, and apart from the standard applications, we can build custom applications, custom solutions. Like, uh, let's say we can build an application as per our business requirement. We can perform all the admin activities, like we can perform automations in that. We can generate reports on that. We can uh, manage page layouts, validation rules, everything we can do with in as a Salesforce admin. All operations we can perform, all customizations we can perform within Salesforce. But the problem is, but the question that then why do we need Salesforce development? Yes. Anyone, any guesses? Why do we need that?
So
Yes.
we can customize things. We can build more comprehensive solution that suits our business requirement.
But for example, if we can say, if we talk about customization, if you say, let's say, if we have to build an object, we can do that in Salesforce. If we have to manage the layouts, we can manage the layouts. If we have to do automations, we can perform automations.
So for example, I work in Experience Cloud where we develop these experience sites. So there are a lot of components that are inbuilt from Salesforce. They come out of box, but then
Mhm.
we have specific requirements that requires some kind of modification to the existing out of box components, or it requires a brand new feature which does not even exist right now with Salesforce as those components.
That
So we have to
that's
create
right. That's right.
custom.
We have to create. That's right. Because the reason is, when we talk about the standard, when we talk about the inbuilt functionalities in Salesforce, let's say if we talk about page layouts, so there are certain limitations with the page layouts. So what are the limitations? The limitation is, like, obviously the first thing, as you mentioned, that we would like to build some custom components to be placed on the community cloud or the lightning, you can say the lightning builder, which we would like to place it on the community cloud, right? Not only on the community cloud, but that those components we can place in our Salesforce also. Okay, within Salesforce also we can use that. For example, let me do one thing. Just a minute. Let me log in into my Salesforce org, and we'll discuss about that. And for this, I'll just log in and then I'll share that. So yeah, just give me 1 minute because I got a lot of applications. I'm just checking which application to use. Yeah. Let me use this one only, and later on we'll just build a new one. Okay. So now, when we talk about the customization part, when we talk about when we talk about Salesforce, let's say. So let's get into the Salesforce. Now, when we get into the Salesforce here, in Salesforce, we used to have an application. So, for example, there's a sales application. This is my sales application. Now, in this sales application, if you can see in this sales application, we used to have objects like account objects. Okay, account objects. But the problem with the layouts is, if you just open this object and if I click on new button, there is one limitation. The limitation is that we can add maximum, we can add maximum two columns here. We can add only two columns, as you can see. If I want to add more than two columns, can we do that? Not possible. We can't. Okay, we can't add. And if I want to add some styling to the fields, can I do that? Let's suppose the business requirement comes that the client wants a custom page to be placed on the community cloud. and on that custom page, the client wants to display. Basically, the client wants to present the data in like the present the data in the form of a HTML page. The look and feel will be like a website, like a web page, not like an object, because this looks like an object. And this is an object actually. Account is an object. But what we want to do is we would like to customize this and present it in the form of an in the form of a okay in the form of a HTML page, like a web page. Get it? Number one. Number two, there are certain limitations with this. For example, we can't do like it's not possible to customize these fields. For example, if I want to add some styling to these fields, I can't do that. Or if I want to add some logo, my company logo, can we place a company logo on this page? We can't do that. Like if I want to place it somewhere here at the top of the page, I can't do that. Or if I want to change the background color or the background theme, it's not possible. So, in short, it is not possible to customize the page layouts. In page layouts, we have limitations. We can add fields, we can manage the fields, we can change the locations, but only with the limited number of columns and sections. We can add as many as, but still, the number of columns will be limited. Minimum one, maximum two, and we cannot customize the fields. It's not fully customizable. Number one thing. Number second, let's suppose if I would like my users, my end users, because obviously the components or you can say the web pages, they will be used only by the end users, except admin and developers, end users. So we would like to expose those pages to our end users, right? Now I don't want the end users to access all the records. Let's take an example. For example, do you have idea about that how the customer executive works? For example, if you have any complaint about a product and if you reach out to the customer service, how do they work? Any idea how they work?
You mean a sales rep?
Yeah, no, no, not sales rep, service representative. I'm talking
Okay. So
service
they
representative.
they will they will open a new case, and is that how you're
Okay.
asking?
I'll sorry to interrupt you here. See, cases means they have to get into they have to navigate to the sales application sorry, service application. In service application, they will click on a new button and then they will create a new case,
Hmm.
right? But
Right.
in this case, the service executives they need to have access on our Salesforce object. Right. But what the company does, if the company will be, let's suppose my company cannot afford the salesperson, I don't want to hire the salesperson, but what I want to do, I just outsource my requirement to to a company, and they can offer service, they can offer support to us. So in that case, what I need to do, they have the resources, and what happens? They got the resources, and with the help of the developers, I'll build a custom solution, custom interface, and their service persons will access their service person will access our interface, and with the help of that interface, they can register the cases, they can search the cases, they can find out the solutions, anything they can do, the service executives, anything they can do, they can perform all the operations, they can register new case, they can preview the existing cases, they can close the case, they can escalate the case, they can do anything, but they cannot perform these operations by directly getting into the Salesforce. What we do, we build a separate custom solution, like a public portal, you can say. Obviously, they
Hmm.
have to sign in, then only they can only use those portals. But I need a separate portal for them. I don't want them to log in into my Salesforce org. Understood?
Yeah.
So in that case, we'll again build a community portal, and on that community portal, we will deploy the interface. We will deploy our components, and we'll tell the end user, the service executive, that whenever they want to new case, they can use this particular component, or they can use this page, they can use this link. If they want to update, they can. Okay, if they want to escalate the case, they can use this option. If they want to close the case, they can use this option. So they have all the information, but they are not directly working on my Salesforce org. Understood?
Yeah.
So our primary objective is to build a custom interface for our user. And now in that case, one more thing, because we will not be sharing all the details, will not be giving permission, will not be giving them permission to get into or login into our Salesforce org. So they will be able to preview the details which is shared with them, or you can say we will be controlling the presentation part, that what information and in what format, in what structure, in what will the look and feel of the presentation. Okay, that is, so information we need to be shared with the end user, but in which format, what will be the format for that, and that we used to control by the components. Earlier, when Salesforce was introduced, and especially for the, because you know that in 2000, after in 2014 the Lightning was introduced. Before that, everyone was using Salesforce Classic, right? So for Classic, Visual Force pages were there. Still, Visual Force pages will be supported in the Lightning, but Visual Force pages were they are pages actually. They are pages. So there are certain limitations with the Visual Force pages. You might have heard about Visual Force pages. I believe both of you have heard about the pages, Visual Force pages. But there are
Yeah.
limitations with the pages. Pages, if you have to reuse the pages, for example, one page is created, and I would like to make a copy of that page. I cannot clone that page. The only way to do is we have to copy paste the code again. Like I'll create a new Visual Force page and I copy the code from the previous Visual Force page into the from the existing one to the new one. Okay. And if we will be doing some customization, so what happened? We have to stop sharing our Visual Force page. Then we will customize it. We'll do the modifications. Then we'll test the Visual Force page. And once it is tested successfully, then finally we deploy our Visual Force page, or we'll make that Visual Force page available for the end users. That's the limitations with the Visual Force pages. Right. And also, the Visual Force pages were directly communicating to the classes. Which classes? To the Apex classes. So actually, initially, if I talk about Visual Force pages, they were using MVC architecture. Have you heard about this term MVC architecture earlier anywhere?
Nope, not me.
No. So MVC, see both Lightning component and the, you can say Lightning web component, or you say Visual Force, they have an architecture and they will be using MVC. But yes, Lightning component architecture is different from Visual Force one, the MVC architecture. There is there is one, you can say one additional classes or controller over there. But when we talk about the if we talk about Visual Force pages, see, obviously we are not going to work on the Visual Force, but I just want to give you an overview about it so that you will be able to understand that why Salesforce launched the Lightning Web Component. What's the reason behind that, right? So initially they were using MVC architecture, and MVC stands for Model, View, and Controller. So model always represents our objects like standard objects or our custom objects. So model always represents our objects. It always refers our objects. Then we have view. View means is the presentation which is accessible by our end user or which is presented to our end user. And we have two types of views actually. We have two parts over there. So we have standard pages. Standard pages are these pages right now. When you click on new one, the page which you can see the page layout. That's a standard one. So that's a standard pages. And when we say standard pages, so standard pages means this standard, you can say the standard look and feel. And yes, we have certain limitations. I've already told you the limitation on this page, right? And what's the limitation? The limitation is that no customization and number of columns will be limited. Now, when it comes to the Visual Force pages or the components, component means component means you can say the Lightning components or the Aura component. What exactly they do? These are the view means the presentation. The end user is going to interact. For example, if you have booked a flight ticket, let's suppose you have booked a flight ticket to India, and maybe you booked the ticket maybe long back ago, and now you want to take a printout of your ticket. What will you do? Let's suppose if you want to add some additional facilities into that ticket in that ticket. So what will you do then? Like web check-in you have to do. So what will you do then? You will directly get to the airline database and then do the modifications, or they will you will use the interface, the front end interface provided by them.
Front end interface.
Front end interface. But why not the database? Because you are a customer. You will be boarding a flight. You will be using their services. So why don't you get into the data? Uh, why don't we be performing operations on the database directly?
Because it's not accessible to the customer, to us as a customer.
Obviously, it's not accessible to anyone. Only the internal users can do that. Only the internal users can access that. Okay, limitations that comes with limitations. Clear to you? So
Mhm.
it's not allowed to everyone. So what we now in your case, what will you do now then? What will you do then? So you will navigate to their website or the portal. Then it will open a page. In that portal, you will enter your ticket number or the PNR number, which is shared with you, the required details. And once you enter the required details and hit the search button or retrieve button, what happens? The request will be forwarded to the backend server. The backend server will read your request, accept your request, and process it. Process in terms of it will check whether all the details are correct, or and also the ticket number or the PNR number you enter that exists or not. Let's suppose if you enter the wrong ticket number which does not exist, so obviously it will return an error. It will return an error to you that the ticket number does not exist. Understood? Or the details does not exist. Or else, if the everything is fine, then what happened? What the backend server will do? The backend server will respond. It will fetch the data. It will fetch the information or details from the database, and it will present the information back to the front end. Front end means the view. Now, this is the responsibility of a view, how to present the data to the end user. Because the information which is returned by the controller, this in the form of a query, or maybe in the form of a list, or in the form of okay, in the form of a list, or other maybe in the form of a single, you can say in the form of a collections. But to present the data to the end user, it always required in a proper format. And that is the responsibility of front end. That's the responsibility of view to control it. Understood? So that will be done by either by Visual Force pages or by components. Okay. Now, fine. Okay, right now, if I fill up all the information, so I enter all the details here and I click on save button, what will happen? Yes. Any guesses? Like if I just fill up if I just enter all the details, I just enter account number, account name, and everything, and click on save button. What is going to be happen then?
After save, it creates a new record.
It creates a new record and it will open details section. It will show the details of that record.
Right.
Right. Is there any possible way that we can uh, change the redirection? So my requirement is once we fill up all these information, we fill up the details and click on save button, instead of redirecting to the detail page, I want to redirect here on the account page. Or I just want to display a confirmation message, record created successfully. That's all. I don't want a redirection. I don't want to open detail page. Can we do that? Can we change the logic written on this?
Not out of the box.
Not possible because that's a default logic. That's a logic which is default written defined by Salesforce, and that is controlled by standard controllers. Now, what is controllers? Controllers will be your Apex class, because as I mentioned that once we forward our request to the backend database, backend server. So on backend server, there would be a backend logic will run, and who will run the logic? Who will handle the request coming from the front end? Who will respond back to the front end? That is done by the Apex classes. So in backend, we used to have Apex class. Now, if the Apex class is written by Salesforce, if the logic is defined by Salesforce, and we will not be customizing it, that means that is all standard controllers. But if we want to define our own custom functionalities, custom logics, that is customized by custom controllers. So just now you mentioned that it is not possible to do the modifications on this one, the logic written on this. If you want to do that, we have to go for out of the box solution. Okay, and that out of the box solution we will be going to write on custom Apex class or controller class. Understood?
So can I create
Okay.
a custom class to modify the standard controllers too? So
No,
something
we
can
will
something
no
overwrite?
we cannot. If you say that if you is it possible to replace this override? No, we can't. What we can do, we have to create our own custom controller class. What we can do is we can replace this. Instead of this one, we can display our own buttons. That is possible. That
Okay.
we can do.
So if we are
Okay.
seeing 10 fields in this new account
Mhm.
section, can I modify those fields to show only one field or two field? Is the new account this part is
Yes,
uh,
in that
oh,
case, yeah, definitely in that case, what we can do, we can create our own component. And right now, what happened when we click on a new button, it opens the standard page. Instead of this, what we can do when we create our component, the Lightning Web component, so we can do like this, we can do one thing. When we click on this, we can open our own custom component.
nice. Okay.
So see, the thing is, we cannot do customizations on this. I cannot change this. It's not because see, these all are standard fields. So
Mhm.
I cannot change the standard fields. I cannot modify the field. But what we can do, we can build our own custom interface, and we can replace this whole interface with our custom interface. And how do we do that? Instead of this button, we will place a quick, we'll place a quick action, and
Mhm.
that quick action will launch our component, Lightning Web Component.
Okay.
Okay, and what happened when that component will open? Obviously, when that component will be launched. So once we fill the data and click on save, it will insert the record into an account object and run as per our requirement. Okay,
Mhm.
yeah. So that is possible. So that means where we have now, according to this, where do we have to work now? So do we have to work with the objects or do we have to work on the front part and the controller part? Where are we going to work?
On the controller.
Controller. And what about the
Uh,
front end then? Don't, don't we need to customize the front part, front end, like the front interface?
So if we change the controller, the front end will obviously change by, I mean, we
It will
need to
not change.
work on
Obviously,
controller.
we need to work on that. Actually, we need to work on both of them.
Okay.
Okay, because if you work only on controllers and if you don't change if you don't change the front interface, if you don't create any Lightning components or let's say Lightning Web components, how are you going to how are you going to call that component then if it is not created? Anything which is not created, can we call that component?
Got it. Okay.
Understood? So we
Yeah.
have to create both. So we have to work on both the components. We have to work both on the components as well as on the control.
Mhm. Okay.
Understood?
Yeah.
So before we begin the customization part, the front part, it is very important to understand the backend functionality, backend controllers, that what all features are available in the backend. How do we create an Apex class? How do we write an Apex class? How the Apex class works? Okay, and what all functionalities do we have in the Apex class? How everything works, that we need to discuss.
Okay.
Okay, so that we need to discuss, and that's what we'll be going to discuss in this training. Obviously, we are not going to touch the custom controllers because in Lightning Web Component, we'll fully work on the standard custom. Sorry, we'll fully work on custom controllers, not on the standard controller. We will not be going to do any customization with the standard controller. because standard controllers, it is controlled by Salesforce. But we will be working on our customization, custom controllers. So we will be working on custom controller, that is Apex and visual, you can say the component part. See, this is the MVC architecture. But when it comes to the lightning component architecture, the lightning component architecture is different from the MVC. So this is my lightning component architecture. And if I'll open this lightning component architecture, you can see this. Can you see the difference between both of them, this one and this one? In here, in MVC architecture, we have only three files, like one model, one view, and one controller. But here, if you see the lightning component architecture, now lightning component architecture means uh, for both for LWC as well as for Aura. Okay, both for LWC as well as Aura. So if you look at this architecture, so here we used to have two controllers. So we have two controllers here, if you see. And one controller will be a client side controller and one controller will be a server side controller. Okay, first thing. Second thing, as I told you that Visual Force pages are pages. Visual Force pages, it's a page, and if we have to clone a page, we have to copy paste the code. We have to copy paste the code. We have to copy the code from one Visual Force page to another. So we have to copy paste it. But whereas when it comes to the Lightning component means whether it's a Lightning web component or it's a Lightning Aura component, both of them they follow the same architecture. Okay. Now in this architecture, okay, before this, I want to ask one thing to both of. So, do you have any idea about client and server?
So for Salesforce, we are the clients and Salesforce is the server side.
Okay, that's a you can that you mentioned based on according to Salesforce. But in general, what is Salesforce? What is a server? What is a who is a client? Who is a server?
So someone who creates a request is the client, and someone who responds to the request would be the server.
Server. Now let's suppose this is my client and that's my server. And what we'll be doing on client, we got a form. We have to fill this form. Basically, we fill the form, and once we fill the form, I click on save button. Okay, I click on save button once we filled it. And here we used to have fields. Let's suppose I just want to add name and email ID. I just want to save name and email ID. That these are the two field, name and email ID. And I click on save button. So before, like once we submit this button, I just wanted to make sure that this field cannot be blank. This field cannot be blank. Understood? So what we want is we have to make sure that the fields which will be mentioned on the pay, the fields which we mentioned here, these fields cannot add to the client. Right now, let's suppose one by one, like for example, if one user will be interacting to the client, sorry, if one user will be interacting to the server, then it's okay. Server can easily manage. Okay, let's suppose if you have to communicate with 100 people. Okay, if you have to communicate with 100 people, and if you are, is it possible for you to communicate or talk to all the 100 people all together? Can you do that?
No,
So then what we'll do? We'll do one by one communication,
but that will
right?
take a long
One by one
time.
communication. That will take a long time. But if we want multitasking, but see, obviously, in human beings, it is very difficult to do that. We cannot answer to all the 100 people at the 100. We cannot answer all the 100 questions at the same time. But in the basically in client and server, we can do that because server can handle n number of requests. Okay. Now just imagine that from the client. Now just now we discussed that where are we going to run the validation logic, the field validation logic. Just suppose that the validation logic will be written on server. If one client forward a request to the server, so it will be easy for handle it will be easy for server to handle one single request. Just imagine that if you have two clients or three clients, it will be easy. A server can manage. But what if we have 10,000 customers, 10,000 clients, they are communicating together at the same time. So is there will be a performance issue for the server? Will there be a performance issue?
Hmm. If
Do
the
you think so?
server is not scalable, so
Hmm.
if there is a limited capacity on the server, then it will show a performance issue.
Obviously, but okay. So that's why. So see, two things. Either the company they have to increase their server performance, and how they can do that? They can just change the server. They should bring a high. They should get the high configuration server. Got it?
Right.
But in that case, still we don't know that how many requests we'll be getting. Let's suppose out of no today what happened. Previously, what happened? My server was able to handle requests of let's say we can easily handle 1,000 requests at a time. So we just scale up the server according to that. Gradually, what happened? The my business grows pretty fast, and what happened then? More customers, more clients were interacting, and it goes up to 10,000 requests at a time. So I have to again scale up my server and change the configuration, scale up my server, and I just set this to 10 as per let's say 20,000 for example. But now what happened? It again increased up, and now 1 lakh requests I will be getting at the same time. So that means every time we have to manage the server performance and we have to scale up our server. But don't you think that scaling up server every time it's a cost? It's a like I said, it's expensive. We have to pay a cost for that,
Right. Yeah.
right? And let's suppose right now the 1 lakh request, but sometimes what happens that we'll be getting only 10 requests. So the rest of the resources will be useless for the server. So instead of that, so the Visual Force pages working on the same concept. On Visual Force pages, the client will forward all the details to the server, and server will be running all the validation, field validations, data validation, all sort of validations will be going to perform on server side. You can say all the performance will happen on the server side. So server, what will what we'll be doing, I will be perform basically I will be managing the you can say let's say field validation will be running the field validation, okay, field validation to validate the fields, and also we have the data validation to validate the data. Data validation means let's say the data already exists, email already registered, that sort of data validation. Okay, so in Visual Force pages, we have to perform both the operations on server itself and even the database also. And because obviously the server is going to interact with the database, so this will this will impact the server performance. Okay, this will impact the server performance. But when it comes to Lightning component architecture, now Lightning component means whether it's a Lightning Aura components or Lightning Web component. In Lightning Web component, what happened? Basically in the Lightning component architecture, what happened along with the client, if this is my client on client side itself, okay, on client side itself, the JavaScript will run. So basically what we'll do, we will shift this field validation, only the field validation from server, we'll move this from server to we move this from server to this server to client. I just move it from server onto client, this field validation. And how can we do this? This we can do by using JavaScript. That's why for Lightning Web component or for Aura components, JavaScript will be must, because JavaScript will be used by you can say JavaScript will be used in backend, and JavaScript is a client-side programming language which mainly used by the web developers or in the web applications to run the field validation, the format validation on client side. So now it was like this. Whenever we submit the information, whenever we submit the data, first of all, it will forward that request. It will forward a request to the field validation on the client side itself. If any error occur, it will revert back. If any error occur, it will revert back that there is an error. You have to resolve this error. These fields are blank. The format is not correct. Email format is not correct. Phone number is not correct. Number of digits are not correct. Something like that. And if it's validated successfully, then only it will forward a request to the server for further data validation. Because using JavaScript, we cannot perform the data validation. So data validation will always take place on the server side. Understood?
Yeah.
So the that is the difference between the MVC architecture and the Lightning component architecture. And that's why if you see here, if you look at here in the Lightning component architecture, we have client side controller. See, server side is our Apex class. But as you can see, we have client side controller also. And what will happen whenever we submit our information from the component, it will first forward that detail to the JavaScript. See, this is, if you see the extension, this is .js. So
Right.
it will forward that request to the JavaScript. This JavaScript will run the validation. It will validate the fields. Once the validation will be done, then only this JavaScript will forward that request. That it will this will forward that request to the server side controller class. And server side controller means Apex class, where the actual logic will be written. Okay, after all the validations will be done, it will validate to the server class. Now, if there is any data validation, that will be done by the server, the Apex class. If no data validation required, it will perform all the DML operations. Or you can say it will
So,
perform all your, yeah, to
so I understand what is field validation from your example. What is data validation? Can you give an example,
data
please?
data validation. Let's suppose you have entered. Okay, let me get back to the same example. You booked a flight ticket, and now you want to take a printout of your ticket. So what you did, you open the website and you navigate to the website, you open a URL and enter your ticket number. Okay. Now, every airline they got a standard format of a ticket number, maybe 10 digit, maybe 11 digit, maybe 7 digits, something like that. But let's say it's a 10 digit. But what you did, you enter only 8 digits.
Hmm. Okay, got it.
So where that validation is, where that so it's a field validation or it's a data validation.
Data validation.
No, it's not. It's a field validation. The number of fields.
So if we have entered only 8 digits in my
Yes.
ticket number
So,
instead of.
right. So that's a field validation. So that will
Oh,
validate because that will validate on the client side itself because it will say the format is not correct. Numbers are missing, incorrect, or you can say the invalid number.
okay.
Okay. But if you have entered the 10 digits, and then you requested to take a printout to for your ticket for the details. In that case, the first validation with the field validation, it will validate the format is correct, the number is correct. Sorry, the digits, the number of digits are same, the number of digits are correct. The field validation found yes, it is correct, or the JavaScript found everything is fine, it looks fine, then it will forward a request to the server side controller. Now, in server side controller, the data validation take place. It will validate whether do we have that ticket number exists in the database or not. Let's suppose your ticket number is AQR 12123456. Okay, but what you did, you entered APR 123456. So there will be no detail about the ticket number. Understood?
Yeah.
So that is a data validation, and that will be done on the server side because the server will not allow the JavaScript to load all the data on the client side because server executes only on the backend, and we do not want to expose the full data to the client. We only want to share the we only want to return with the required information. Whichever information is required, we only return to that. Now, for example, you requested only for one, you requested the detail about your ticket only. But what do you think? The server will share the complete data to the client. on the client side? Obviously not. What the server will do, server will, based on your request, it will search for that ticket number. If the ticket number exists, if the record exists, it will fetch that record and then it will forward that record back to the client. But if the record does not exist, it will simply return no record found. Understood?
Yeah.
That's the data validation.
Okay. So we are basically sharing the load in Lightning component. We are dividing the load from the server
That's
client
right.
server.
That's right. That's right. And why we are doing this? Why will be doing this? The purpose of doing this is so that, first of all, it will increase the performance for the client because Visual Force pages, because see what happened, you know that earlier what happened, the user, they are not very much interested to access the data, to access any information on their mobile phone because mobile phones were not used extensively, especially the smartphones. So since last 10 to 15 years, you can say since last 10 years, everything moves on to mobile, right? But before that, if before that, what happened? They used to fetch the information on their laptops or on the systems. But now what happened? If you want to see any report, what will you do? You will simply open your mobile phone. You will just you wanted to check in your mobile phone or on your tab instead of laptop because if you are not travel, so what will you do? You can check. You can directly check on your mobile phone. Get it?
Yeah,
So the Lightning Web Components are specifically designed for the mobile devices. And just imagine that everything will be load on the client side. So don't you think that it will see laptop is fine, the systems are fine. It's a high configuration system, 8 GB RAM, 16 GB RAM, high processor. But your mobile phone devices are they equipped with the like are they equipped with that much of resources?
mm,
Obviously not,
mm,
right? So we required only limited information and lightweight information, you can say.
got it.
Sometimes you might have sometimes you might have experienced this when you load any website and just imagine that everything loads on the mobile phone. Then our like the mobile phone processor, our smartphone processor will not be able to handle that much of request, that much of detail, and then it will get crashed, or maybe it will take maybe hours to load it because it's not possible for a mobile phone to handle that number of requests or to handle all the requests, all the process all the requests. So therefore, only the required information will be forwarded on the mobile devices. And the Lightning components were specifically designed for mobile applications. Okay, not only mobile, but even if we have to if we have to load it on even web servers, also websites, also it will be it will load it can load fast. Clear to
Got
you,
it.
both of you?
Yeah, yeah.
So I hope now you understood that what's the purpose, what's the idea behind the Lightning Web component. Okay, so now when we talk, so we have to start. We'll be going to begin with the Apex classes because first, like as I mentioned, first we have to understand how the Apex class works. How do we create Apex classes? How do we write Apex classes? How do we create variables in Apex classes? How do we create functions or modules in Apex classes? Okay, then we'll see how do we perform, how do we, you can say, how do we validate the details, validate the information in the Apex class, right? So all these things we will be going to discuss in Apex classes. That is called server side controller and Apex classes. Like when you say Lightning components or Lightning web component, Apex classes are the only Okay, Apex classes are the only you can say other resources they can perform the operations on an object. If you can see the flow, a view or you can say this view cannot connect to an Apex class, cannot access the Apex class. Let's suppose in an Apex class there is a function. I'll explain all these terms again later, but just suppose. I would like to make a request from view directly to server side controller to an Apex class. I can't do that. So first of all, my request will be forwarded to the client side controller. That is a Java that is written in a JavaScript. Okay. From JavaScript, okay, from that JavaScript, we will call Apex. We will call the Apex class controllers. Whatever information we have written in Apex class, or if there any function, if you want to access, we want to call. So from client side controller, the JavaScript will call that function. And if you see, the JavaScript cannot directly interact with the model. Model be the object. So JavaScript cannot directly call the object also. So they have to follow a proper channel,
Mm.
right?
Okay. Mm.
And if you see it is divided, it's already divided into two parts, client side and server side. On client, we have view and client side controllers, and on server, we have model and the server side controller.